When you're starting to learn a program and are staring at a blank page, that's when you really want to know how to get the ball rolling. So to get you started, I want to show you some of the tools and techniques that Illustrator has for drawing all kinds of different shapes. I want to get started on creating and editing new documents and going through the document setup dialog box and seeing what all the choices are in there. But there's something I want to do first. Now, we'll talk about customizing Illustrator and setting general options towards the end of the course, but there is one option that I want to do now, and that is I want to set the measurements to inches. That is the default measurements. Like any OS X program, you can get into options by pressing Command comma, or using the menu on the Mac, you can go up to the Illustrator menu and then down to Preferences. If you're in Windows, you could go to the Edit menu and then off to Preferences. Either way, let's come out here to where we see Units. And by the way, let's say if you chose one of the other items from that flyout menu, you'll be in this general dialog box anyway, and all those items on the flyout are here on the left, so you could choose Units. By default, Illustrator tends to set the units to points. So let's just click that. You see, you have other measurement systems here as well. Let's choose inches. That's for general measuring, but you see stroke and type are set as points. Let's leave it that way. It just makes the most sense to do that. Now, even though we are setting this to inches, you should know that Illustrator has this tendency of setting your documents back to points anyway, so this is not going to be 100%, but it's better than not doing it at all. Anyway, so let's click OK, and creating a new document, just like any other software, because the word new begins with the letter N, you could press Command N or Control N in Windows, or you could go to the File menu and choose New, and you see the shortcut is there. And this brings us to the New Document dialog box. If you just set the default to be inches, you can see right over here the units are set to inches, but you want to keep your eye on that because every so often that will change back. So let's talk about what's going on here. First thing is it's giving you a suggested name. Now, untitled isn't much of a name. You don't even have to set anything here because when you go to save your document, if you leave it here as untitled, Illustrator will simply bring you to the Save As dialog box and you can give it a real name. If you type in the name of the file, the name you want to save the file in here first, that'll simply be the suggested name. Now, we'll come back to the profile a little bit later. But let's take a look over here. It asks us how many artboards we want. So that way, if you know right off the bat you want 2, 3, however many artboards, you don't have to start creating them as you're editing the document. You could do it right here. Now, let's say I wanted maybe 2 artboards, and I'll click this up arrow. You have a couple of buttons here that tell you how will they be numbered. Actually, you know what? Let's increase this to 4 because that will make this a little bit more understandable. Do you want them to be listed first across and then down, or first down and then across? Or do you want them all just in a row, one after another, or one on top of another? So you can do that. I just want to bring this back to 1, but that's kind of a handy feature. Now, the next thing here is what size do you want? And I'll just click that. And you see I have some pretty standard sizes, letter, legal, some European sizes. I'm going to leave this here as letter. And because letter is 8.5 by 11, it shows you that. Now over here under orientation, this is now what's called either tall or portrait. If you go to landscape or wide orientation, it simply switches 11 by 8.5. I'm going to switch this back. Now over here, it asks you what bleed you want. And that's something that you'll need to ask your commercial printer, because if you're going to create artwork that bleeds off the edge of the page, the commercial printer will tell you, okay, I need a 1/4 inch bleed space, or I need a 1/2 inch bleed space, whatever that is. Now, if you want to enter that in, you don't have to enter in each box individually. You see at the end this little link thing right now I have is highlighted. Let's say I need the bleed to be a 1/2 inch, so let me just change that to 0.5. As soon as I do that, boom, immediately it's changed over there. I'm going to set that back to a 1/4 inch just so we don't have a lot of wasted space. If you do decide that you want maybe more of a bleed in one direction and not in the others, you can simply turn off this linking thing. So now let's say if I want a 1/2 inch just on the top, I can do that and it doesn't affect any of the others. I'm going to turn that back on anyway. Now we have this advanced section. If you don't see the advanced section, you might see it just like this. you could click the little twirly arrow. And this is just giving us some other information. For example, our color mode is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black for printing. PPI, that's pixels per inch, is 300. You might be wondering, oh, wait a minute. At the beginning of the course, weren't you talking about Illustrator being vector? And that's true, but this is for what are called raster effects. In Photoshop, you can actually apply some raster effects to your overall drawing. And if you do that, what resolution do you want that to be? And also, we don't want to align to the pixel grid. But click the little twirly arrow here, and you can say, oh yeah, instead of CMYK, I want this to be RGB. Or if I'm going to have raster effects, what resolution do I want those to be? And over here, it asks you which preview mode do you want to start off in, and it could be the regular default preview, or maybe you prefer working in pixel preview or overprint preview. It doesn't mean you're going to be stuck there. That's simply going to be which one do you want to start with. Let's go back here and take a look at profiles. And you see we have several built in. Print for regular, actual, old-fashioned paper. Do you want to create your document for the web? Now, if you choose web, you see you have some built-in web sizes, and these may be some familiar-looking numbers to you. And because I chose web, now the units are set to pixels, which makes perfect sense. There's no bleed because you can't really bleed off the edge of the screen, and the color mode is set to RGB. And the screen effects is set to 72 pixels per inch because that's a pretty standard computer screen. Now, if we go back up here and we choose devices, this is really cool. Look at the sizes that we have. We have for iPads, iPhones, Kindle Fires, various other types of Android devices. Also, we have iPhone 5. There's no choice for the newer iPhone 5S and 5C. That's because this version of Illustrator was created beforehand. But it doesn't matter anyway because they're all the same screen size anyway. So you can choose one of those. And if I choose iPad, it shows me what are the dimensions. And like any of those others, will be in pixels and RGB. And if you're doing video and film, you can choose widescreen, old-fashioned style, 4:3, and so on. 4:3 would be this plain old NTSC as opposed to widescreen. If you're doing for European, you could do PAL. If you're using Adobe Premiere Pro, these DVC Pro will come in handy. Let's say if you're going to create a menuing system or something, that'll be shown. And as far as profiles, if you want just a plain old basic RGB, you can do that with nothing fancy. Let's go back to print. And this is what I was saying before, is that even though it's print and it's letter, Illustrator still put us back to points. So here's where you have to manually go back to inches. And click OK. And now we have our new document. You can see we don't have a ruler up here. And I generally like to work with a ruler so I can see what I'm doing. So there's a few ways we can display the rulers. You could either press Command-R on the Mac or Control-R in Windows, and that turns the rulers on and off. You could also go up to the View menu, and down here on the View menu, go to Rulers, and then from the flyout, you can choose to show rulers. Now, because we're working in inches, you can see it's inches. But here's what's really nice, is let's say you decide that you do want to work in points, or maybe this is showing you points and you want to get back to inches. You don't have to trash this document and recreate it. You don't even have to go to the Document Setup dialog box. All you have to do is right-click inside the ruler, and then you can change the measurement system. And when you do that, you notice even though I clicked on the horizontal ruler, it also worked for the vertical ruler. So if I want to get back to inches, I'll just do this in the vertical ruler this time, go back to inches, and it changes both of them. Now what I want to do is get back to the Document Setup dialog box, though, and with this button right over here. You notice nothing is selected. I don't have anything on the document. If I had an object selected, my control bar here would show me everything related to the object that's selected. But now I can click Document Setup, and I'm here basically in the same dialog box. I don't really need what's in here. I'm just going to hit the Escape key and get out of it. One other thing before we actually start putting stuff down on the artboard is let's reset our workspace. So over here where it says Essentials, click that, and then down over here choose Reset Essentials. If you haven't done any modifications, if you haven't pulled apart any of the panels, you don't have to worry about that, but just to make sure that what you see on your screen is exactly what I have here. So let's save the document before we actually start using it. And saving a document in Illustrator is like saving a document in any other program because the word save begins with the letter S. You can press Command S or Control S in Windows. You could also go up to the File menu and choose Save. And it asks us, okay, you had this untitled document. What do you want to call it? I'm just going to call this First Drawing. And I'm saving this in the Chapter 2 folder of the project files. I'm saving it as an Illustrator document. Click Save. Now I get this Options dialog box. The version, well, this is Creative Cloud, which is also known as version 17. If you want, you can save down to older, much, much older formats from when your grandpappy was a little boy. You can save all the way back. Now, here you have a choice of fonts. If you have fonts that are embeddable, and keep in mind that many fonts, or even most fonts, are not embeddable, but if you are using embeddable fonts, you can have Illustrator subset them if you're not using all of the characters in that font. What that means is, let's say you have some font that you're using just 3 letters for this font. It's maybe a logo or something. Why make your file unnecessarily large by including the entire font with all of the characters? That's what this means. The upside is that your file size stays smaller. The downside is, what if you need other characters? Maybe you're going to hand this document off to somebody else and they don't have that font, and they say, oh gee, that really shouldn't be the letter C, that should really be the letter O. The thing was rubbed out a little bit, and they don't have the letter O because it isn't subset, and then you have to send it back to them. So just kind of use that however you think is best for you. Now, options here, create PDF compatible file. I don't really know of any reason not to do that. That means that this document is going to be more compatible with older versions of Illustrator, and it'll be easier to modify them. Also, you can take this, convert it into a PDF, and then maybe somebody who doesn't have your original Illustrator document can still open up Illustrator, import the PDF, and then edit it. That's a really nice feature to be able to do that. ICC profiles, these are for color profiles. Don't worry about that right now. Compression, it'll just make the file size a little smaller. That's really all we have to worry about here. And now click OK. And the file is saved. You can see there's the file name. So after all that, we're ready to start drawing something, and we'll pick that up in the next lesson.